So in this video, we'll be designing a tattoo from start to finish using Procreate. If you're new to Procreate, we'll be touching on some of the basics throughout the video. If you have used Procreate before, you might just learn a different approach, a different way of doing something. It might speed things up for you. This is just the way that I do it. This is my workflow, my process, what works for me. There's other artists out there that may do it differently. So I've chosen to design a tiger and a rose tattoo for this video. This is because I love tattooing both tigers and roses. Also, they're very popular tattoos, so it might be that you have to design one in the future and you might just want a bit of inspiration. I'll be doing a video soon showing exactly how I stencil this design. And once lockdown's over and we're allowed to tattoo again, I'm hoping to do a video of me actually tattooing this design. So you'll be able to see the whole process from start to finish. So if you do enjoy this video and that's something you'd be interested in watching, then please subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss out. So here we are in Procreate with an A4 canvas ready to go. I'm using A4 canvas because I print the stencils off onto an A4 piece of paper, so it just makes life easier. First things first, we're going to drop the images we're going to use onto the canvas. To do this, we're going to go to the top left corner and click the spanner icon. This is going to bring up this drop-down menu. If your images, your photos are saved in your camera roll, click Insert Photo. In this case, I've made a file, so I'm going to click Insert File. So here you can see we've got all our references, all our photographs that we're going to use for this design. So I'm going to start clicking these and bringing them into Procreate. So we've got all our images on the canvas. Next, we're going to go up to the layers icon, which is at the top right of the screen. I'm going to tap that. This brings up the layers drop down menu, and you can see each of our reference photos are on a different layer. So we're going to take the arm and put it to the bottom of our layers because we want that to be below everything else. So to do this, you just tap and drag it and pop it down the bottom. We're also going to hide this, so there's a little tick on the right hand side of the layer. If you tap that, it'll hide the image because we won't need that till later on. We're also going to do the same for the leaves, so tap and drag and then hide that. Also going to hide the rose layer because I'm going to work with the tiger first, so we're going to hide that, and then we're going to tap on the tiger layer to select it, so we're going to work with that first. Okay, so now we're going to resize the image. Top left corner there's an arrow icon, tap on that. That's going to bring up this boundary box. You can use your fingers to manipulate it and resize it, or you can use the pencil and tap one of the blue circles and just drag it. It's important at this point to make sure you've got uniform selected, because if you've got freeform selected and you try to scale your image, it's going to manipulate it, it's going to distort it, it won't do it in proportion. But I'm going to click reset at the bottom of the screen. So making sure we've got uniform selected, we're just going to drag that up and make it a little bit bigger. This is going to be a black and grey tattoo, so the next thing we're going to do is desaturate the image. In order to do that, we click on the magic wand icon at the top left of the screen, and then the first option down is hue, saturation and brightness. Tap on that and then layer, and then take the saturation bar and just drag it to the bottom. At this point, what I do is normally introduce a bit of contrast into the image if it's needed. To do this, go back up to the magic wand icon and then click curves, which is the third one down, and then layer. That's going to bring up this graph at the bottom of the screen. On the far left you've got your blacks or your shadows, on the far right you've got your highlights and your whites, and then you've got everything else in between, so all your midtones. I'm going to lift the blacks ever so slightly just so I can see the detail in the black stripes of the fur and the darkest bits of the image. And then I'm going to tap on it to create a new point, and then I'm just going to drag that down ever so slightly. Then I'm going to tap to make another point and just lift it so we've got a really subtle S curve. Now we're going to do the exact same thing for the rose, so tap the layers icon again. Then we're going to hide the tiger for now, show the rose, make sure the rose layer is selected. We're going to tap the arrow icon and just increase the size a little bit. Then we're going to go back to the magic wand icon, hue, saturation and brightness, layer, and drag that all the way down to the bottom. So now we're going to do the curves. So magic wand again, click curves, layer. Now in this image I'm going to leave the blacks where they are, just because the only thing that's really that black is the background, which we'll be getting rid of in a minute. So now I'm going to tap a new point and bring it down slightly just to increase the shadows. Then I'm just going to lift them a little bit here. And then that's looking good. Okay, so now we're going to remove the background from the rows. To do this, go up to the top left corner and you'll see a little icon that looks like an S. If you tap on that, it will bring up your select options, making sure automatic selected. We're going to tap and hold onto the background. So what tapping and holding is going to allow us to do is change the threshold of what's selected. So by dragging the pencil to the left or the right, you can see that we're changing what's selected. So if this selection was spill over into the rows, which obviously we don't want to delete, we could adjust that. So I'm going to leave it there for the moment. We're going to do the same for the top. This might be slightly more difficult because we've got this leaf, which has a bit more of a tonal range to it, which is similar to the rows. Don't worry if you've selected something that you didn't want to. You can just tap the screen with 2 fingers and it'll undo the selection. This is looking pretty close. We're probably going to have to erase some little bits, but nowhere near as much as we would have had to before. Before we remove the background, we want to put a feather on it so it's not such a harsh line, so it's a bit of a gradual fade. So there's an option down the bottom called feather. We're just going to take that up to 1%. Okay, so next we're going to invert the selection. So at the moment we've got the background selected, but we want to copy and paste the rows. So if you invert the selection and then click copy and paste. So once you've done this, if you go up to layers, you'll see that we've got 2 roses. We've got the original image and then we've got the rows that we've just copied and pasted from the selection. So I'm going to hide the original so we can see what we've got to work with. And as you can see, we've got a pretty clean cut of the rows. There's a few little bits we need to erase, which isn't a problem. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So make sure you've got that selected. I'm going to go up to the eraser tool at the top right of the screen. And then within airbrushing, make sure you've got the medium airbrush selected. You can adjust the opacity and size of the brush with this toolbar at the left hand side of the screen. The brush size looking okay. I just do it by eye really. If I go and do it, it's too small, I'll increase it, or vice versa. I want the opacity at 100%, so deselect that. So we're just going to take away what's left. So that's the rows finished. Now we're going to do the same for the leaves. So going back up to layers, we're going to hide the rows, unhide the leaves, and make sure the leaves are selected. Then we're going to go up to the magic wand icon, hue, saturation, brightness, layer, reduce saturation like we did before. Now we're just going to leave these how they are. Normally I'd freehand leaves on. We need to remove the background from these leaves, so we're going to go up to the select tool again, make sure automatic is selected. Then we're going to tap and hold. This one's pretty straightforward. I'm just going to make sure we get these little gaps in between the leaves here. I'm going to put a feather on. Just going to do 1% on this one, and then we're going to invert it. Copy and paste. So if you go back up to layers, you can see we've got our original and the one with the background removed. So I'm going to hide the one with the background removed. Okay, so we don't need the originals anymore, so I am going to delete those. So swiping left on the layer that you want to delete, you'll see it comes up with these options. Just press delete. I'm going to do the same for the leaf. Okay, so now I'm just going to name my layers. So tapping on the layer brings up this menu on the left hand side. Very top, you've got rename. I'm just going to name that rose, enter. And I'm going to do the same for all these. So I'm going to name this one tiger. I'm going to name this one leaf. I'm going to name this one arm. So the next thing we're going to do before we start actually designing the tattoo is just take some of the background away from the tiger. We've also got this border around the leaves that we need to get rid of. So we'll start with the leaves as we've already got those selected. All I'm going to do here is change the background colour of the canvas just so I can see that border to erase it. So clicking on the background colour, it will bring up this colour wheel. All we're going to do is select black, click off that. Then we're going to go back to our eraser tool and we're just quickly going to erase that background. And then we're just going to go layer, background colour, and switch it back to white. So now we're going to do the same for the tiger. So we're going to hide the leaves, unhide the tiger, select it. So we haven't really got much background here to delete. It's mainly just getting rid of these harsh edges. So with the eraser tool selected, we're going to drop the opacity down to around 20%-ish. Bring the brush size up. And very carefully just going to start taking away these edges. So that's looking good. Now we've sort of prepped all our images, it's time to actually start putting them together and designing the composition of the tattoo. So we're going to click on layer, then we're going to tick our rose and our leaves, and we're just going to move them all around so we can see them. Okay, so this is what we've got so far. Now I'm just going to start resizing everything and just juggling it around, trying to see what works. First thing that's jumped out to me is the lighting. It's normally the first thing that I look at when I've got my references in. So the lighting on the tiger is very subtly coming from the left-hand side. If you look at the left-hand side of the nose, there's more highlights in comparison to the right-hand side. So it's suggesting that the lighting is coming from the left. Whereas if you look at the rose, our lighting's actually coming from the right. You've got the highlights on the right-hand side and the shadows are dropping down to the left. So because this is a realism tattoo, we want it to be convincing that it's real, which means all the lighting has to come from the same direction. So all I'm going to do here is go up to layer, select my rose, then click the arrow icon, and then there's an option down the bottom called flip horizontal. So we're just going to flip the rose. So now the highlights are coming from the same way as the tiger. This should give us a bit more of a convincing piece and should just look like the images are meant to work well together. Okay, so now I'm going to start moving stuff around and resizing it, just having a little bit of a play really. So I'm going to go layer, select my tiger, and then I'm just going to resize him slightly and move him up. I'm going to rotate his head slightly so he's not so uniform. To do this, you can either use your fingers and spin it, or you can use this green handle at the top of the boundary box. Okay, so now I'm going to select my rose. Just make that a touch bigger. Bring it up. Okay, so now I've got them roughly the size that I want them. I didn't want the rose to be too big in comparison to the tiger's head, because roses are obviously smaller than tigers. Equally, I didn't want the rose too small, because I still want to get that detail in the centre of the rose and not make my life difficult. So I'm going to leave it here for now. We're going to go onto the leaves. So clicking layer, select the leaves. So I'm going to duplicate these leaves because I want 2 sets of leaves. So if you swipe left on the layer, it'll come up with these options again as we did earlier. Press duplicate. Okay, so I'm just going to move these leaves around. Okay, so I've had a little bit of a play. This is roughly what I'm thinking. So now we're going to go ahead and drop this onto the arm template. So going up to layer, we're going to group all these together so we can move them as one. To do that, we're just going to swipe right on all the layers that we want to group together. This will select them, and up the top right hand side of the layers drop down menu, you'll see delete or group. I'm going to press group. So this has now grouped all those selected layers together in one folder. We're now going to swipe left and duplicate this folder. We're going to hide one of them and just drag it down to the bottom out of the way, because we'll need that later on. Okay, so now we're going to unhide the arm layer, and with our group selected that's visible, we're going to tap it and flatten. So basically this has put all those layers into one layer. It's completely flattened and merged them together. So now we can go ahead, we can move this, resize it, and see how it looks best sat on the arm. So I'm just going to erase some of this background that we've missed around the ear. To make this easier, what we can do is go to layer, click on this little N icon on the layer, and then drop the opacity down to about 50%. So by doing this, we can see exactly what's sitting on the arm and what part of the design is going to wrap around the arm. So I'm thinking something maybe around here.
Now we've got to this point, we're happy. We're just going to take away what's not sitting on top of the arm. So selecting the eraser tool, going to have sort of a mid-sized brush, a low opacity. I'm just going to start taking this away, make that a little bit bigger. Okay, so now we've done that, we can turn the opacity back up. So go on layers, click the little N and drag that back up. So now we want to add some background. We're going to create a new layer. You do this by clicking the little plus icon at the top, and then we want this layer under our design but above the arm. So we're going to hold and drag this down. And then we want to select the brush. We want to make sure we've got medium airbrush selected. And then this little black circle at the top of the screen, if you click that, it brings up a colour wheel and you change the hue and the brightness of saturation. We want it black anyway, so that's great. So you want a fairly big brush, and we want it on a low opacity so we can slowly build a smooth gradient up. So just slowly working out from under the design. Increase that a little bit. Not being too particular about it because we can just take this back in a bit. Okay, so once you've got it to a point where you're fairly happy with it, go onto the eraser tool again and just take away what's overlapping the arm. So once you've done that, if you increase the size of the brush, lower the opacity, you just start working away what you don't want and just making it a bit more subtle and soft. You can keep doing this process till you're happy with it, just build it up, take it away. Okay, so I think that's looking pretty good there. The next thing we're going to do to make it actually look like a tattoo on skin is go into the layers. First of all, we're going to merge these two layers. So if you click on the top one, bring up this menu, and at the very bottom, you've got merge down. This will merge those two layers together. So now that's one layer. If you click on the little N, this is your blending options for that layer. So if you go up to multiply, it will basically make it look like it's tattooed on skin. If you want to make this a little bit more subtle, a bit more soft, maybe more like a heel tattoo, if you drop the opacity down just a touch. So yeah, so this is the finished product. This is what I'd send over to a client to give them an idea of what I've got in mind, or I'd put this on my social media as a pre-drawn design that was available. The only problem with this is you can't actually use it to stencil because we've just erased half the design. So if you go up to layers, if you remember, we duplicated this group earlier. So this is what we can use to do the stencil off. So as I've said, I'll be doing a future video stenciling this tattoo, and then hopefully after lockdown, I'll get the opportunity to actually tattoo it. So you'll see the whole thing from start to finish, the design, the stencil, the application, and the actual tattoo process.
If you've made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your support. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you learned something, or at the very least got some inspiration. Let me know in the comments if there's anything you particularly liked or disliked. I'm open to criticism, constructive criticism, and I'll see you in the next video.